Hi, everyone. My name is Derrick Covington, and I'm a specialist here at Old Line Government Affairs. And welcome to another edition of Online with Old Line. For this edition, we are excited to introduce Delegate Anne Kaiser, representing District 14 in Montgomery County. Welcome, Delegate Kaiser, and thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
Well, thank you, Derrick. Thanks for inviting me. Glad to be here.
Great. Just to give Delegate Kaiser some background, she was raised in Rockville, Maryland, and graduated from Rockville High School. She then attended the University of Chicago, graduating with a BA in political science in 1990. After that, she earned 2 master's degrees from the University of Michigan in 1995, a master's in public policy and a master's in educational studies. Between college and graduate school, Kaiser worked for an Iowan Congressman, Neil Smith, as well as Maryland Delegate Hank Heller. She was first elected, to the Maryland House of Delegates in 2002 and was appointed as chair of the powerful Ways and Means Committee in January of 2017. As chairman, she helps to set the direction of K-12 education policy and is instrumental in advancing voter protections and easing the tax burden on working families. She also serves on the Rules Committee, as well as 2 joint committees, the Legislative Policy Committee and the Spending Affordability Committee. While working in the legislature, Kaiser has found a second career in teaching. Currently, she's an adjunct professor at the University of Maryland, College Park, teaching a course on women in politics, and an adjunct professor at Montgomery College, teaching an Introduction to Political Science course. Delegate Kaiser was named by the Daily Record as one of Maryland's top 100 women in 2006 and has been named Legislator of the Year 4 times for her work in education policy. Most recently, Delegate Kaiser received the Advocate of the Year award from the Maryland School Counselor Association. A lot of milestones, a lot of achievements.
And you left out the best ones, or the best one, and that's being mom to little AJ. That's number 1.
That's great. How old is AJ?
She's a little over 2 years old. 2 years, 2 months.
Cool, great. So let's just jump right into the questions.
Sure.
Delegate Kaiser, to get us rolling, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the district that you represent?
Sure. I'll fill in the blanks of what you didn't say, because you said a lot there in your bio. I grew up in Montgomery County. I was always fascinated by politics. I knew I wanted to go into this kind of public service, and I didn't have a family that was politically active, but I had parents who were perfect voters. But I was that kid in 10th grade when my parents didn't want to go to the polls because it was cold out and they were going to cancel each other out on the big races. And I gave them the big speech from my 10th grade history class about rights and responsibilities. So this was definitely the place for me to be. All that you mentioned and the political stuff, very much enjoyed my service in the House, and then a lot of community involvement I did beforehand, and certainly other things since. Nancy and I have been married for coming on 8 years, and now we have our toddler AJ, named after my aunt Joan. So life is good. Working hard and enjoying working with my colleagues to try to make Maryland a better place to live.
That's great. Nice. You've been a member of the Maryland General Assembly for quite some time now. What originally inspired you to run for office?
Sure. And then I realized in the last question, let me go back to that. I didn't really talk about my district. So let me just quickly say, while I do represent Montgomery County and people imagine the high population centers in our county, that in fact, we have a big rural area, and that 2 of our districts, including the one I represent, includes some rural areas and a lot of farms. So people don't imagine that that's part of my district. And then back to the question that you said, did you say the biggest accomplishment?
What originally inspired?
Oh, I apologize. I'm jumping ahead. Originally, I mean, I have to go back to, as I'm aging myself here, to 1975. I was 7 years old. And for me, it was civil rights fights that were happening at that time, that for women and for African Americans. And so I remember deciding then that I was a Democrat. And I think reading all my biography books on Jefferson and Lincoln, really the same two books, one about each of them, that I read 50, 100 times a piece. I thought, oh, I want to be president one day. So while I certainly would never want that job, too many gray hairs and not very thankful, but I love the political role that I'm in. So I was really fascinated and have been talking about this since I was a little kid. And then issue-wise for me, in my teenage years, it was part of a youth group discussion, and we were all assigned to talk about a issue area that was the most important one in society. And as I listened to the group talking about education, I decided they were right, that was the number one issue. So that really became the issue that I ran on. And I was writing my college essays about equal educational opportunity. So I've been fascinated by these kind of policy issues since I was young.
I guess would being in Montgomery County with education, your interest in education, I guess, has that helped in any way? Or it hasn't really been, I don't want to say it hasn't been a factor, because obviously education is always going to be a factor, but has it, I guess, played into anything that you've done?
I'm not sure exactly what you mean. Could you ask that? I mean, it's important, so I'm not
Right,
sure I'm answering the question that you want me to answer.
right. What do I mean exactly? I guess just with your interest in education, has that, I guess, helped to shape policies that you'll bring to legislative sessions? Like that, I guess that's what I was getting at.
Sure. But my experiences go well beyond my own education in Montgomery County. And I do remember when I worked for the Iowa congressman that you mentioned early in my bio, that he said everyone thinks they're an expert in education because they went to school. So I don't want to ever base things just on my own experience. And that's part of the reason I got my master's in educational studies, so I could have some more training. But I think it's so important to listen to everyone's experiences. I would say from my particular experience in Montgomery County, it was my older brother who said, look at the honors classes at our high school and realize that the richer neighborhood is sending more kids to those classes than the poorer kids. And so that was happening early in my life. And so, and in some ways that issue still permeates throughout the whole state, those equity issues. So in that sense, my experience in Montgomery County does drive what I try to do in education policy.
How has your experience in Annapolis been similar or different to your expectations?
I always love that question, Derek, because I've always told people that nothing has surprised me. But that makes it sound like I knew what was coming, and by no means did I know what was coming. And like all legislators, there's so much to learn from the experience. But nothing in particular has surprised me. The part I like discussing the most with people is just the relationship side of things. As you mentioned that I teach, my students have trouble understanding how I can be friends with people who I disagree with on very important civil rights issues and other things, and describing that mine and my wife's favorite legislator is a former state senator who voted against our right to marry, and yet we love him dearly. And that one of my delegate colleagues who voted against our right to marry ended up hosting our baby shower. And it's like, these are things people don't understand. So what I've really enjoyed is that having that front row seat to certain policy issues, and being put in a situation where I have to deal with people who disagree with me. I notice that so many of my friends, and I really think a problem throughout America right now, is people seemingly only engage with those who agree with them. And in the legislature, we end up engaging and in most cases really liking our colleagues who disagree with us and learning how to disagree without being disagreeable. but I think that's getting lost in our national politics. So I guess if anything surprises me, and so it's more so it's the thing that fascinates me the most, that I love explaining to people, is that how important it is to have those relationships and how fortunate we are in the assembly to have those relationships.
Right, definitely. Okay, here's the question that you were ready for earlier. What's been the biggest accomplishment of your legislative career?
I'm going to go to something I just passed this past year, but early on and for a long time, I was saying, you know, what one of my tombstone one day is to say that I helped vote for marriage equality in the state of Maryland and to ban the death penalty. That those were my proudest votes. One issue I worked on a lot more than the other. But this past year, I worked on something called tax sales. And it was something, while I'd served on the Ways and Means Committee all this time in the assembly, once I became chair, I got more briefings on it, one-on-one, and to really understand that when someone gets behind on their tax bill, that essentially a lien is put on their home and these charges. And so someone who's already having trouble paying their property tax, some tax sale attorney has bought their lien, and then someone ends up owing all these fees and fines and all these other things. And it primarily strikes older African-American people in the city of Baltimore. And it's more a class issue than race, but then for the city of Baltimore, it ends up being a lot of elderly African-Americans, and people were losing their homes over $500 tax bills. And the 24 jurisdictions in the state of Maryland use these, I don't want to say middlemen, I don't mean to be gender specific, but the middle players to be involved with collecting these loans or this money because of not wanting to be in the business themselves. But in the process got skewed over time, that all the policies were being directed to favor the tax sale attorney and not necessarily someone in debt. And to have created a program, and really bills from over 2 or 3 years, but specifically this past year, to create more education for these people, more opportunity to know about all the different tax credits they could be receiving, all the ways that the state can help more and keep people in their homes. This is an issue that impacts all 24 jurisdictions, not mine as much as some others, but for this point, I would say it was my proudest legislation.
That's great. Thanks. What policy initiatives do you hope to accomplish in the future?
That's a big one. I'm not sure I have enough time. I don't mean in this conversation. I don't think I have a long enough career to do all the things. We're still not that perfectly, we'll never be perfect, but to be that equal and just society most people hope that we live in. In terms of education, really making it real that a student's zip code doesn't define their future educational opportunities, nor their economic opportunities as adults. More in particular, we've already passed something this past 2 years in the legislature that will be doing a lot to enhance education for all kids to try to narrow that gap. But like particular policies in the future that we haven't done enough with, Maryland's done a great job, for example, by telling foster youth that they can have a free ride to college in the state of Maryland. But that sounds fantastic. But it's almost a false promise. I believe 2 or 3% of foster kids graduate from college, because the reality is for a lot of people is that it's not just the cost of college, it's the cost of life. And it's not having those supports around you of someone who can help you fill out the financial aid forms, or someone who can lend you $100 when you're behind on your bills that other kids would have. So I think we need to do a lot more to really wrap our arms around foster youth. In terms of election law, obviously a big issue coming out of this last election cycle. We in Maryland do everything we can to try to enhance those opportunities when so many states right now are trying to make it harder for people to vote. And we took quite a few actions this past session to expand voting. And I'm looking at more things in that regard that makes it easier for people to vote, easier to register, to make the instructions easier. And it seems like pretty simple stuff. I used to say that education was the core of a successful democracy. I'm now more worried and like a switched focus, realizing that people's the privacy, security, and accuracy of our elections matters more to the fundamental of our democracy, as well as people's confidence that our elections are private, secure, and accurate. And I think Maryland has an opportunity to be a model in this area. Those are two of the main issues within my committee's purview. My committee also deals with something we call the subcommittee Finance Resources. It's actually, or that's what it used to be called. It's now called by the proper name of Racing and Gaming. And we've done some good things there. I'm glad that we passed the sports betting bill after the referendum of the voters said they wanted that, and giving responsible people the opportunity to spend their money as they see fit, and having some of that money supporting the state. And then when it comes to the last piece of our committee, taxes, and it's always trying to make the case of trying to lessen the burden of lower income individuals and just make the tax system more fair. So, but those aren't specific, but I just mentioned those just because they're under the purview of my committee. But a lot of issues on my plate, and in some cases, as the chair, it's other people will take the issues and I'll help guide it and direct it further. And it may not be under my name, but I'll do some work with it.
Those are a lot of bills, a lot of important ones.
Yes, yeah, a lot of things.
And then to wrap things up, what's one unique thing or fun fact about yourself that you'd like to share? And it could be anything.
Gosh, for all my prepping and the next half of your question about the picture I sent in and explaining that, I'm not sure I thought about the fun fact. When I was much younger, I used to love to tell people that in kindergarten, I won the pancake eating contest. So I don't think I could win today. But I was benefited by having an older brother that said, roll the pancakes, you'll beat everybody today. So,
Good strategy.
Take advice from people who've come before you, for sure.
Definitely. I remember, I want to say first grade, we had like a pizza party type of day, and had a bunch of pizzas, obviously. And I think I ended up eating like a whole pizza by myself, like as a first grader. So wow. I can relate for the eating competition.
Well, we only had to eat, I think, 2 in kindergarten. And I remember taking the first bite out, and then I remembered my brother's advice. So you take fewer bites. And then mine was the first hand to go up. I'm not sure where it is, but I'm fairly certain I still have the trophy. Actually, I think it might even be in my office. I may have put it there.
It's a very good thing to have in your office.
You bet.
All right. Well, thank you, Delegate Kaiser. We really appreciate the interview.
Well, thank you, Derrick. I appreciate it, and glad to have the opportunity, and I'll talk with you and others further.
Definitely. Thanks so much.
All right. Take care.